Coming up on Bridge City News, there's been a COVID-19 outbreak at a Lethbridge High School. We will explain how many are affected. A scholar strike is taking place at many universities across Canada, including here in Lethbridge. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly has the details. And we get a glimpse of one of the largest diamonds ever discovered in North America, which is going up for auction.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. An outbreak of COVID-19 has been declared at Chinook High School in Lethbridge. This means that 2 or more cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed. School Superintendent Cheryl Gilmore spoke about what the school board is doing to keep its students safe.
I know that Alberta Health Services were at the school this morning, and I think we can be incredibly proud of the protocols that our schools have in place. Certainly everything that's in the re-entry guide that's been recommended on the part of the province in the re-entry guide. Schools have worked incredibly hard to have those in place, including all of the personal hygiene protocols, emphasizing those things, putting students into cohorts, the distancing in classrooms as best as possible in a near normal circumstance, and so masking. I mean, really, in terms of COVID-19 transfer, it takes a whole community in terms of an effort for preventable measures to be taking place. I really believe and I'm confident that the schools have really worked hard to have prevention in place and all of the measures in place.
If 2 or more confirmed cases of a staff member or child at the same school are declared within 14 days or that are linked to each other through a school exposure, the situation is labeled as an outbreak. A letter has been sent to parents about a COVID-19 outbreak at a high school in Calgary. Alberta Health Services, 2 or more cases have now been confirmed at Henry Wisewood High School. It says the local medical officer of health has declared an outbreak and public health is investigating to determine who may have been exposed to the virus. There was another confirmed case at the St. Wilfrid Elementary School in Calgary. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says 16 different schools in our province now have confirmed cases, but were all acquired outside of school. Henshaw says even though students have been infected with the virus, the numbers are still quite low.
I want to stress that while we are calling these outbreaks, this is a very cautious use of the term. We are acting out of an abundance of caution by treating 2 cases who were in a school while infectious within a 14-day span as an outbreak, even when the cases are within one family. This is an extremely low threshold to meet. All outbreaks are still under investigation by AHS. There is no evidence of transmission within the school in any of these outbreaks.
There were 113 new COVID-19 cases in Alberta and only 3 in the South Zone. So far, close to 840,000 people have been tested for the virus in Alberta. The province also announced today that Albertans can now receive their COVID-19 test results, either positive or negative, through an SMS text message or an automated phone call. Alberta will begin offering flu vaccinations in about a month. Health officials say getting vaccinated will be critical this year to prevent flu cases from flooding hospitals amid a potential second COVID-19 wave. The province has purchased an additional 360,000 doses of the vaccine this year, bringing the total number to 1.96 million doses. The HSS residents in long-term care homes will be offered flu shots beginning October 13th, with all others following on October the 19th. Countless professors across the country, including a handful from the University of Lethbridge, are taking part in a protest called the Scholars Strike. Now, the 2-day event is to shed light on anti-Black and Indigenous racism. As Ainsley O'Reilly discovered, there are also calls to defund police.
Directing attention, both the scholars' attention and students' attention, to the anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism is a good way to do that.
Beyond targeting anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, Scholars Strike Canada states, we must support the demands for defunding the police and redistributing those resources.
There's no reason for an armed, militarized police force to be walking around in our community, and there is no reason for that other than land theft and dispossession. And there's no reason for that to exist in our university campuses.
Our work, as I see it, is actually to try to interrogate and ultimately work towards dismantling the dominant structures and dominant systems themselves.
One student who prefers to remain anonymous says that defunding the police is a radical approach and feels that people with his stance have been ignored.
Only one set of views is viewed as acceptable. And one set of views is viewed as the right set of views, and opposition is not accepted or appreciated or valued.
U of L organizers say that they received positive feedback from students and added that it's important to have difficult conversations.
They felt like they were engaged, they were learning, and that that fire was lit within them to work towards some significant social change.
Yes, that means making space for differences of opinion, but as much as anything, it means being willing to have the difficult conversations rather than the too easy conversations that we so often have in these kinds of institutions and institutional spaces.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Chronic fatigue syndrome. Many people have never heard of the condition, but for one local man, those 3 words have changed his life in the past year. As Micah Quinn explains, the family is trying to raise awareness and funds to help him fight this debilitating illness.
Chronic fatigue syndrome, or myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's an illness Carson Gunn has had to deal with. His girlfriend, Sienna Trevelia, says he was diagnosed over 2 weeks ago, and this has affected his life in almost every aspect.
He was really into weightlifting and very active person. We used to hike together all the time, go to the gym together. So that kind of is completely cut because he's bedridden.
There is a myriad of issues that plague people who have the illness.
People have all kinds of other issues. They have trouble sleeping. They feel unrefreshed. They have trouble thinking clearly. So for people that are trying to work, this is actually one of the main problems. They can't think quickly and efficiently and accurately.
Currently, there is no cure for the illness, and over 500,000 Canadians live with it.
And that's from Statistics Canada. So we think it's a fairly accurate number. And up until the formation of the ICANN CME research being funded by CIHR, we had no Canadian research. And so the lack of treatment is a big sore point with patients. They feel like they're suffering and the system isn't really responding.
Trevelia has made a GoFundMe for her boyfriend's medical bills.
So the GoFundMe just raises so much opportunity for him to get better and hopefully heal from this disease. And yeah, everyone's just been so nice and so kind, and the donations are unbelievable.
The GoFundMe for Carson's treatment bills is currently over $20,000 and rising, with the total goal of $60,000. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
6 Indigenous groups are still celebrating landing an equity stake in the $1.5 billion Cascade Power Project. It's a natural gas power plant located near Edson, Alberta. To discuss this in a little more detail is the Alberta Minister of Indigenous Relations, Rick Wilson. He joins me on the phone from Edmonton. Now, Minister Wilson, this would not have happened without a collaborative effort involving First Nations and the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. What does this business relationship mean moving forward?
Well, it's such an awesome venture that we're working on here, and this will, to get our first project under our belt and out the door, shows that it's a real thing that's happening here, and that the government is serious about working with Indigenous people and making them partners in prosperity with Alberta. And like I say, this includes all the First Nations and Indigenous and Métis people as well. As long as they find a good, viable project, it's a backstopping program. So on this program, we're backstopping $93 million of good faith from the government that will backstop this loan. And what it does is it allows them to get involved in projects where normally they wouldn't be able to access cash because you can't take a reservation or a Métis settlement and use it as collateral.
How do partnerships like the Cascade Power Project really help towards reconciliation?
Symbolism on reconciliation, but we're doing what we call past Grand Chief Willie Littlechild told me, he says, Minister, he says, what we want is reconciliation. And that's what this is all about, is action. And you heard Billy Morin, Chief Billy Morin yesterday, he said this government moves at the speed of business, and that's why things work. And that's what we're trying to do is, we started a year ago putting this together, and I consulted with the First Nations and Métis people all across the province to how we should set this program up. And and then we just went to work putting it together. And
that was the Alberta Minister of Indigenous Relations, Rick Wilson. The province says it has no plans to follow BC in closing or constraining businesses despite a surge in COVID-19 infections. Earlier this week, BC ordered new restrictions on businesses that serve alcohol in response to a spike of cases linked to those venues. That includes shutting down nightclubs and banquet halls. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says it's up to people to exercise personal responsibility. Since June, Alberta's had no cap on the number of people allowed in restaurants, cafes, lounges, and bars, provided public health measures are being followed. The opposition NDP in Saskatchewan is concerned long lines at new drive-through COVID-19 testing sites could discourage people from waiting. Traffic was lined up for blocks at a new site in Regina this week. NDP MLA Carla Beck says people who are already nervous about going for their first test may decide not to wait. The testing center operates 3 days a week. Billions of dollars have been spent on research and development to try and find a vaccine for COVID-19. Josh Morrison is the executive director of a group called One Day Sooner. It's a group that advocates on behalf of coronavirus challenge trial volunteers. Now, Morrison says thousands are lining up to participate in human trials, which are vital toward finding a vaccine.
The fact that it's a global pandemic makes the value of this research all the higher. And so, the name of our organization is One Day Sooner, is the idea that right now, something like 4,000 to 5,000 people around the world are dying each day of COVID. Now, it's likely that if you did these challenge studies in 1,000 people, no one would die. And if you could even save 1 day of deployment of a vaccine or end the shortage, or end the crisis 1 day sooner, that represents thousands of lives saved. And that's an enormous benefit for willing volunteers who understand the risks to participate in studies to achieve.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Morrison as we also discuss the health risks these volunteers are being exposed to. That's coming up later in our program. Now, when it comes to making masks during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is not the size of the pores in the fabric, but the material itself. As we see and hear in this next report, the melt-blown textile used to make the best protective gear is getting more expensive and harder to acquire.
The wispy material rolling off this production line is made from plastic, but it might as well be spun from gold. It's melt-blown textile, the material that makes certain face masks so effective against the coronavirus.
The melt blown previously was roughly $25,000 to $28,000 per ton, and then towards the end of April went over $450,000 per ton. It's a complete seller's market.
Most of the raw material for personal protective equipment, or PPE, is made in China. And amid critical shortages, medical mask and gown makers around the world are running out of this crucial ingredient.
We definitely need more capacity, and it's restricting our ability to do what we need to do for the country.
Prestige Ameritech is the largest domestic maker of medical masks.
We need factories manufacturing the raw materials. We need to step that up.
There are just a handful of American businesses producing melt-blown textile, and those firms say they can't make enough. The Trump administration has spent more than $20 billion on COVID-19 contracts. But despite early warnings, the federal government failed to block exports of the material by those domestic producers. And it hasn't yet made the long-term commitments U.S. manufacturers say they need to ramp up production. University of North Carolina researcher Philip Clapp explains that mask filtration efficiency doesn't depend on the size of the pores in the fabric, but on the makeup of the melt-blown plastic.
That the electrostatic charge of the material actually helps to kind of suck up these smaller particles out of the air and makes them work very well.
Rear Admiral John Plovchek heads up FEMA's Supply Chain Task Force. He says he's confident that increased domestic production will be able to meet peak surge demand for COVID response.
We've systematically attacked the supply chains from raw material to manufacturing to distribution.
Lidl Incorporated is spending more than $25 million to add 2 melt-blown lines at its New Hampshire facility. But Reese says American manufacturers will never be able to compete with Chinese prices. And he's reluctant to spend millions on a market that will most likely evaporate when the pandemic passes.
Without some significant intervention or legislation, it's not going to happen. It's very, very risky.
Alan Breed, Associated Press.
Today is Worldwide Suicide Prevention Day. Now, the family of a 15-year-old girl who killed herself is speaking out, saying it was constant bullying which led to her death. Relatives of Abe Khan say she died on Friday of last week after months of being targeted by other students at St. Gabriel's School in Chestermere, located just east of Calgary. The girl's father says the bullying took a mental toll on her and continued throughout the pandemic. He says he spoke with school officials about his daughter's concerns and was told that one of the teens was briefly suspended. The Calgary Catholic School District declined to comment on her death. Wildfires continue to threaten thousands of homes and forcing thousands of people to evacuate in 3 U.S. West Coast states. The fires are setting records in California and are being called unprecedented in both Oregon and Washington state.
Last night, a couple cars came up with their blue lights and their weird sirens, and they just said, everybody out. And so my neighbors left before I did, and I just did the things you do before a fire hits. You know, get stuff out of the way, and I just got in my car and came down here.
How does that expression go? Diamonds are a girl's best friend? How about a diamond that is more than 100 carats? Sotheby's Auction House in New York will be auctioning off one of the world's largest diamonds ever discovered in North America. The 100-plus carat diamond will be sold on October 5th with no reserve.
Any diamond over 100 carats is exceptionally rare. A D-flawless diamond over 100 carats is rarer still. So this is actually the 8th D-flawless diamond of normal shape that has ever been sold at auction. The best sort of way you can relativize the size for this diamond is it's about the size of an egg, and it fits sort of like an egg in the palm of your hand. But it's, the best way to describe it is it's just exceptional. It's perfect color, it's perfect clarity, the cut is unparalleled, and it's just a perfect diamond. We're doing something unprecedented with this diamond, where we're offering it without reserve and without an estimate. So there is theoretically no minimum selling price, but we're really going to let the market decide what the price of this diamond is. What's interesting about this diamond is that it has a great story. It was discovered in 2018 in the Victor mine, which is actually located in Ontario. So it is one of the most exceptional diamonds to ever come out of North America. It was meticulously cut over the span of a year, and this is the only time it's ever been offered for public sale. So really, this is almost a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have a diamond of this size, of this caliber, that's going to come up for auction.
That is one sweet-looking rock. The last 100-plus carat diamond sold for $22 million US in 2015. Hey, our summer weather has been hanging on a little bit longer, and that trend will continue for the rest of the week and into the weekend. Full weather details are on deck. It is hard to believe that we're almost in the middle of September with the amazing summer-like weather we've been receiving lately. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near 7.
Tomorrow, sunny again with a high expected near 28. A great weekend is shaping up as well. Sunshine at 24 for Saturday, sunny and 26 degrees for Sunday. The clouds return on Monday with a high expected near 27. Tuesday, we should see a mixture of sun and cloud with the temperature dropping to 17. Mainly cloudy and 13 degrees on Wednesday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 21 degrees with an average low of 6. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1968 at 32 degrees, and the record low was -2 in 1955. Sunrise was at 7 o'clock, sunset at 7:58. Let's see how tomorrow's looking across the country now. Environment Canada has issued an air quality statement for today and tomorrow for the West Coast because of the wildfires. Both Victoria and Vancouver are expecting smoky skies and a high near 24 for tomorrow. It'll be mainly sunny and 26 degrees in Calgary. Just a few clouds at 21 degrees for Edmonton on Friday. Sunny and 26 for Regina. Mainly sunny at 25 in Saskatoon tomorrow. Expect a few clouds and 22 degrees in Winnipeg. Sunny and 21 for Toronto. Mainly sunny at 19 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In the Maritimes, expect showers at 18 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Rain and 16 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. A good chance of showers and 14 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain and a high near 19 degrees for tomorrow.
Many businesses have suffered during the pandemic, but not grocery stores. The parent company of Sobeys and Safeway says its first quarter profit was up nearly 50% from a year ago to almost $192 million. Empire says revenue climbed 9% to $7.35 billion. Same-store sales also jumped 8.6%. It says the results include gains from a significant real estate transaction and a large payment related to a collective bargaining agreement ratified right here in Alberta. Popeyes Canada says it will be following COVID-19 protocols when it expands sales of its much-hyped chicken sandwich across Canada on Monday. The move followed trial launches in both Edmonton and Southern Ontario earlier this year of the sandwich that made headlines for quickly selling out. Popeyes Canada says physical distancing stickers will be installed inside and outside of the restaurant. Company officials say the sandwich will also be available through food delivery apps as of Monday. Travel company Transat AT is reporting its third quarter net loss widened to just over $45 million. That's an increase of $1.5 million from a year earlier. Revenue also plummeted to $9.5 million from almost $700 million as its operations were shut down for most of the quarter due to the pandemic. Company officials said they resumed flights for only 1 week of the quarter, ending July 31st. Transat reached an agreement to be acquired by Air Canada last year, but the deal is still awaiting regulatory approval. Roots is reporting better than expected second quarter results despite a 38% drop in revenue over a year ago. It says sales dropped to $38 million due to temporary store closures ordered to help contain the COVID-19 pandemic and restricted hours when they were allowed to reopen. The clothing retailer says losses were only partially offset by an increase in e-commerce sales, which nearly doubled compared to a year ago. On an adjusted basis, Roots says it lost 4 cents per share. Analysts were expecting a loss of 20 cents per share. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 198 points on the day to finish at 16,185. The Dow was down 405 points to 27,534. The S&P 500 was down 59 to 3339, and the Nasdaq was down 221 points to 10,919. Oil was down 95 cents to 37.10 per barrel. Natural gas was down 10 cents to 2.31. Gold was down 63 cents to 1946.21 an ounce, and silver was down a dime to 26.88 an ounce. Wheat is at $223 per metric ton, barley's at $215, canola's at $510, and corn is at $242 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 40 cents to 105.10, feeder cattle were up $1.35 to 139.60, and lean hogs were up $3 to 64.38. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.80 US.
Recapping one of our top stories this hour, an outbreak of COVID-19 has been declared at Chinook High School in Lethbridge. This means that 2 or more cases of the virus have now been confirmed at the school. The HS says if 2 or more confirmed cases of a staff member or child at the same school are declared within 14 days or that are linked to each other through a school exposure, the situation is considered an outbreak. Human trials are beginning to help scientists in their quest to create a COVID-19 vaccine. Details are coming up shortly. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Center for Suicide Prevention is hosting their 3rd annual Run for Life on Sunday, September 27th. Run for Life is a virtual event this year. Anyone who is passionate about suicide prevention is welcome to join for a virtual journey from darkness into light. Walk or run to remember your loved one and raise awareness for suicide prevention. For details, visit Center for Suicide Prevention Facebook page and follow the events link. Come and enjoy an afternoon of Japanese culture at the Nikayuko Japanese Garden as they welcome the Lethbridge Community Taiko Association for an exciting performance on Saturday, September 12th at 1 p.m. Price of the performance is included with admission. For details, visit nikayuko.com. Lethbridge's Sport Council's Outdoor Roving Gyms program is taking place Mondays and Wednesdays from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. behind Nicholas Sharon Arena. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/rovinggyms. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19, there have been billions of dollars spent in research and development of a vaccine. But can we trust what's produced? And when it is developed in such a rush, can we really trust the whole process and those who are developing it? Josh Morrison is the co-founder and executive director of One Day Sooner, an organization that advocates on behalf of COVID-19 challenge trial volunteers. Welcome to BCN, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
Now, earlier this year, you were looking for volunteers for human trials to find a COVID-19 vaccine. What has the response been like?
Well, so it's been really incredible. So our organization advocates for human challenge volunteers, which is a special type of test for vaccines or treatments that actually involves deliberately exposing people to infection. And so that's unusual, and we haven't been doing that yet, though there are several groups that are developing these trials. So we've had over 36,000 people in 160 countries who've said that they would be interested in being in these human challenge trials, and I'm one of those people.
So what are the inclusion and exclusion criteria for each participant?
So no trial has been officially approved yet. So what I'm about to say is a prediction, and it's not, we don't know for sure. But I think the first trials are going to be really restricted of a challenge trial for COVID-19. So the World Health Organization gave some recommendations, and they said that the first trial should have people only who are 18 to 25 and in really excellent health. And I'm actually 35, so that would mean that I wouldn't be able to participate. No, I think based on what the risks are, I think 18 to 40 might be a better idea than 18 to 25, but I would expect that the first of these human challenge trials are probably going to be restricted to 18 to 25 or possibly 18 to 30.
How about human challenge trials involving maybe seniors, people over the age of 65?
So I think that that's unlikely to happen unless, at least at first, I think the world where something like that would happen would be a world where we have very effective treatments and we're testing a vaccine that we think is going to be very effective. And even then, I think it'd be unlikely. And that's because the risks, a disease that has significant risks at any age, and it can kill people at any age. But someone who's, something like age 20 to 30, their chance of dying if they're infected by COVID might be 1 in 15,000, for example. But the risk of someone who's over 80, their risk could be 10%. So the risk goes up exponentially. And so I think that's why it's such a restricted age range. And I do think for the foreseeable future, certainly for the next 6 months, we shouldn't expect to see people older than say 50, certainly older than 60, be in such a challenge trial.
So Josh, once the volunteers have been infected, where do they go to be isolated? Is it at home or maybe a special facility?
No, it's at a special facility, and that's to make sure that no one who hasn't consented to being exposed to infection is getting infected in this trial. So it's in biocontainment facilities that have a very high standard of biosecurity. So there's only a certain number of those facilities that exist throughout the world. Something like 60 of them are in the US, maybe 20 or so in Europe. I believe Canada has 1 or 2 of them that would be suitable for this purpose. So it's going to be a special facility. And that's where the exposure to the infection would take place. It would be in kind of a nasal dropper, kind of like an eyedropper with the virus for your nose. And then you would go right from that to this isolation, where you would be for probably something like 2 to 3 weeks until it was very certain that you were no longer infectious.
How much of a health risk, however, are these volunteers being exposed to?
Well, so I think that what I would say is that it's meaningful, and it's definitely a risk that no one should take lightly, or that no one should, try at home or something like that. But at the same time, it's, by all the data we have, is a lower risk than risk that we let people accept in other circumstances. Like, for example, kidney donation, which is about a 1 in 3,300 chance of death, or childbirth, which in the United States is about a 1 in 6,500 chance of death. And so by comparison, like I said, for that young population, that might be 1 in 14,000. And then that's, if you take out the unhealthy people, it would be lower. So there is real uncertainty about COVID, but, by everything that we know, it's the type of risk we let people accept in other circumstances.
To what degree could the human challenge trials potentially speed up the timeline to get a vaccine?
So I think that we have to think about two different vaccines. The first thing to know is that it's going to take some time to set up the human challenge trials. You need to do what's called an infectious dosing study first. So I don't think we'll be testing vaccines before the end of the year, or maybe at the very tail end of this year we might be able to start testing vaccines. Once you can start testing them, you can, from the time you start infecting the person to the time you get a result, could be as little as a month. So you could really learn a lot. And that's not, you need to still test a vaccine in thousands of people so that you can make sure that they're safe. But that early signal of effectiveness could be very helpful and could speed up deployment by months. Now, that's probably not going to be soon enough for the candidates that are already being tested in these enormous phase 3s, like Moderna's or Oxford's or Pfizer's. But for other things like Merck's or Johnson & Johnson, or all of the more than 100 vaccines that are in development, challenge trials could be crucial to getting that second generation of vaccines that will hopefully be, instead of maybe 60% effective like the first ones likely to be, might be 80 or 90% effective, or might not require a booster shot, might be easier to distribute, things like that.
Now, part of the debate is whether it is ethical to intentionally infect someone with COVID-19. What are your thoughts?
So first, the important thing to know, and something I didn't really know before I started doing this work, is we do these types of infection studies in other contexts. We do infection studies for malaria and flu and RSV, which is another respiratory disease, dengue fever, typhoid, and cholera. So this isn't unique. Now, what is unusual is for most of those diseases, not for flu and not for RSV, but for malaria and typhoid and cholera, we have drug treatments that we can feel confident, once you take that treatment, you're not going to, it's very unlikely to die of malaria, which we don't have yet for COVID. One of the ways this could be useful is helping to test some of those therapies, to get better treatments and therapies. But I think the difference here is that, COVID is more dangerous. But the fact that it's a global pandemic makes the value of this research all the higher. And so, the name of our organization is One Day Sooner, is the idea that right now something like 4,000 to 5,000 people around the world are dying each day of COVID. Now, it's likely that if you did these challenge studies in 1,000 people, no one would die. And if you could even save 1 day of deployment of a vaccine, or end the shortage, or end the crisis 1 day sooner, that represents thousands of lives saved, and that's an enormous benefit for willing volunteers who understand the risks to participate in studies to achieve.
Josh, what really motivates somebody to take this on? They're not being paid. We're talking about volunteering, correct?
So, usually in challenge studies, people do get paid for participation. Most of the volunteers who've signed up, in our study, basically, what we've said is, look, you're going to need reimbursement for lost wages and expenses. You're going to need to make sure that people's long-term health that there's long-term follow-up and things like that. But that's not people's motivation is to be paid. People have different motivations. Not 36,000 people aren't all going to think the same thing. But I think, what a lot of people say, and that's something that I feel, is a desire to feel empowered to be fighting this virus and to be doing something useful during this terrible pandemic. That's a really strong motivation. And I think people also talk about, wanting to protect their friends and family is another reason people do this. And a lot of people have a deep, or volunteers or people who are part of the medical field or the biomedical field. They know about these studies, they know more about this, and they want to be contributing to science and be part of the solution and not just be passively accepting what's happening.
Let's talk about what's happening in other countries around the world when it comes to a potential vaccine for COVID-19. Josh, Russia's come out in August. They declared that they had approved a vaccine for COVID-19. And in Israel as well, they're talking about some of their labs. They're fairly close as well. Have you had an opportunity to be involved in either of those?
So we definitely haven't been involved. And I would say about the Russian vaccine, it's easy to approve a vaccine if you don't wait to see if it works or not, right? Because there's a number of vaccines that have evidence that they cause an immune response. But we don't know if that immune response is actually going to translate to reduced infection. And we also, you need to test a vaccine in thousands of people to make sure that it's safe before you can really deploy it. And I think those steps are important. And so I do think that, by all accounts, what Russia is doing is misguided and overly hasty. I also think there's been recent indications that some of the data they've been using that have been published, even in the very small studies that they've published, are maybe have some issues with them as well. So I do think that, yes, we all want a vaccine and we certainly want a vaccine soon, but we want something that has really strong scientific evidence and that we can feel confident in giving to the public.
Can you explain how the process actually works as well? Developed in the lab, and then when you go to trials, do you start off with mice, maybe make your way up to pigs, monkeys, before you make your way to human beings? How does that work?
Yeah, so usually, I'll first kind of start with the way things usually work, and then how things are maybe a little different for COVID because of the urgency. So usually you would test a vaccine in what's called an animal model. So in a chimpanzee, I think the best animal model for COVID in some ways is actually supposed to be Syrian hamsters, apparently. So usually you test in the animal, then you could do what's called an animal challenge. So you give the virus to the animal and after giving the vaccine. And then if that looks like it works, you test maybe in 30 or 40 people in what's called a phase 1 study to make sure, that any huge safety issues that you can spot that right away. And if that looks good, you expand out to maybe 100 people or so, maybe a bit more, in a phase 2 study, which is testing both that level of safety in a different population, maybe testing a couple of different doses, and then also is testing for what's called immunogenicity. Does it generate an immune response? And then finally, if that all looks good, then you would go to these what's called phase 3 of testing in thousands or tens of thousands of people. And that's both, what you do there is what's called a randomized control trial. You take half of your people in the group who are tested, and you give them the vaccine, and you take half and give them a placebo, and then you see, do the people who get the vaccine, do they have fewer infections rather than the placebo? And you just have to wait for people to get infected naturally. And so, you need something like maybe a couple hundred infections throughout your study to have a decent sense of if a vaccine would work if it was going to be about 50% effective. You might need fewer infections if it was less than that. Now, the difference with COVID is these things are moving much faster. So a lot of these vaccines that are being tested, they didn't start with the animal model before they went into humans. They did those two things simultaneously. Or, if you look at the Oxford study, which is the drug that's going to be produced by AstraZeneca, that was the first drug to get into phase 3 studies. So in some ways, they're moving the quickest. And they combined their phase 1 and phase 2 study, and then they also combined a phase 2 and phase 3 study. So these things are kind of compressed and things are moving a lot faster than they normally would.
Josh, some people suggest that intentionally infecting healthy volunteers with low doses of the COVID-19 virus could help create herd immunity, which could then potentially make the pandemic easier to maintain or manage. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so first I'll say that's not our position. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. Our organization is trying to test, the drugs and vaccines by doing this. This idea, I generally, I basically think that trying to deliberately infect people just as a way of getting herd immunity, I would worry about that for two reasons. First, for the safety of the people who are being infected directly, but more importantly, because I don't know if then they would spread it to other people who aren't going to be safe. And of course, anyone who's trying this, I'm sure they would say, well, look, we're going to isolate effectively, but you can't know that. And I think that there are reasons to be making, I think it's good to be thinking of creative solutions, but I also think it's good to be scientifically driven. I think the better way, there's an interesting article in the New England Journal of Medicine recently that talks about how people wearing masks frequently and social distancing might reduce the viral load that the average person who is infected is getting and might therefore lead to less severe disease. So I would say that generally people should be wearing masks, doing their social distancing. If that means then that the people that are infected are getting lower doses and are more safe, that's a good thing. I would be very skeptical of the idea of deliberately infecting people just so they'd have immunity in the future, in part because we don't know what the immunity is going to look like, how long it's going to last, and what effects it might have. That's actually a good reason to do challenge studies. Is one thing we're working on is to develop a reinfection study to challenge people who've already been infected by the virus, and that can help us understand the immune response better and better guide some of these social policy questions.
Do you work with only certain companies to test their vaccines?
So our organization, again, like I said, there's no studies that have been approved yet to test a vaccine with a challenge study. Oxford has said they're interested in doing challenge studies, though that might just be to create the model to do the infectious dosing study, not necessarily for their own vaccine. Our group advocates on behalf of challenge volunteers. That's our goal. And so, basically what I think challenge volunteers want is to get the most and best vaccines developed and available for people around the world throughout, but regardless of what country they're a part of or how much they earn or anything like that. And so, we want to be helping any vaccine developer that could find this useful. So we do collaborate and discuss some of these things with particular manufacturers or trialists. We've had we have collaborative discussions with Oxford, like I mentioned, but also with the NIH and Johnson & Johnson. But we're definitely willing to work with any group that's developing vaccines to try to get great and effective and useful challenge studies to move things forward as quickly as possible.
Josh Morrison, co-founder and executive director of One Day Sooner. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you.
Marriage, it is often blissful for the first 6 months, and then real life kicks in after the honeymoon fades, and then the hard work begins. What are some of the keys to a successful marriage to help keep the romance going? Joining me at the desk today is Kelly Stickle, lead pastor with My Victory Church, and his lovely and talented bride, Joylyn Stickle, also with My Victory. Thanks for joining me on BCN here, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here.
Yep.
Ladies first, how long have you guys been married?
23 years this year.
Wow. Does it feel like 23 or
no?
Long? No.
No, I feel like
No.
I'm 18, so that doesn't do
Oh.
bad. Yeah.
That's
no,
awesome.
it when you look back at the time when you weren't married, it seems like forever ago.
Yeah.
But no, it's been fun.
Yeah.
For the
Kelly,
most part.
how's the marriage really evolved since when you guys first got married to here we are 23 years later?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's evolved in many ways. I think, you go through all the different phases from feelings to pressing through to getting to know one another to the honest conversations, all of that stuff to working together. But we've been blessed. We both came from very solid homes, and both of our parents were in great marriages, so we didn't carry a lot of expectations or baggage in that. But so we came in with a lot of that stuff, and were able to work through a lot of that stuff.
So Joylyn, when you see that there's signs that your marriage may be in trouble a little bit,
Yeah.
because no marriage is perfect.
No.
How do you recognize some of those signs?
I think when you're with someone for a while, then you kind of know if something's off. You feel if something's off, and I think if you notice something's off, for us at least, we have always been very open. We've tried to be communicating a lot with that. And
Never go to bed angry, right?
Well, we try. There's been a few times when I'm just like, no, we're not doing this tonight. So honestly, right?
Yeah.
But no, that's obviously a very good thing to keep in mind. And and it's wise to not go to bed angry. But also we've found it's sometimes wise not to hash things out when you're tired. So sometimes we just say, okay, we're going to table this till tomorrow. I like you a lot. Just remember that, and we're going to sleep. And then we'll work it when our brains are fresh.
Kelly, how about for you? What were some of the warning signs when your marriage may potentially be in trouble?
I think one sign that is often overlooked is the joy level in the relationship. So if the Bible says, Nehemiah said it in Nehemiah 8:10 that the joy of the Lord is our strength. So if the joy level and the happiness and that joy level seems to decrease in any way, that's an indication that something's not as strong as it should be. So to me, that's one of those signs. If we're not laughing the same together, and the joy in the home is not the same as it once was, the passion wasn't the same, then something is slipping. And so let's jump on it and address it right away.
Now, you guys have kids.
We do. We
How
have
many
6.
Kids? 6 kids.
6 kids, a daughter-in-law, and 2 grandbabies.
Oh, grandkids. Wow.
Yeah.
You guys started really young then.
Yeah, we did.
Right?
We love it. We think we have some energy still to run the race with all the grandbabies too.
Now, do you still have date nights? And how important are date nights?
They're vital. Yes, we do date nights every week, and we've made that a important routine. Pastoring is not a 9 to 5 and then shut it off kind of thing. So there's lots of evenings that are required. So we just decided right from the beginning, and we started pastoring virtually right after we got married.
Yeah.
And so we just decided, no, we're going to make each other a priority at least once a week in a date night, and focus on each other.
Traditional dinner and a movie, or do you guys mix it up with axe throwing?
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we like to get out and have dinner together, just so we can have talk without kids hanging off our arms. But we do talk about the kids mostly when we're out there. We try and say, okay, we're not talking about ministry, we're not talking about the kids, and then
we sit there and stare
a
at
little
each
bit
other.
bored. No.
But you're not on your phones, right?
No.
No.
We make priority not to be.
How detrimental is that to a marriage?
Oh, totally.
Putting in too much electronics, you're on your phone too much, or
Yep.
maybe in front of your computer, or even, other electronics?
Yeah, and I think it can be a habit that hurts a lot of relationships for sure. When you're trying to, you're wrecking memories that could be had one-on-one FaceTime by recording memories or by looking at other people's memories and such. So
it's true. Back in the day when we didn't have cell phones, and you know, somebody would call. There's times where you'd let the phone ring when you're in an important conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But today, when you get a text comes in, or you know, we're ready to drop everything right now and be distracted from the conversation, and that's really detrimental to good
Aren't there also
communication.
temptations as well when you're online? Maybe an old friend wants to reconnect on a social media avenue like Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe an old girlfriend or an old boyfriend, perhaps. And
Yep. And it's easy to hide that too, right? Like it's not like you're getting a letter in the mail from this old friend that your wife or husband could find. It's easy to hide these secret affairs that could happen online.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you rekindle the romance, though? I mean, after 20 years, I mean, date nights are fine, but how else do you rekindle the romance?
Go ahead.
What's the show rated? No, it's about setting aside time for one another. It's also about understanding each other's love language, and I love that book. We always come back to it. It's such a great, you know, we can be communicating love and communicating passion, but if the other one's not receiving it in the way that we think we're communicating it, then we're missing. So it's really about investing in the other person, what makes them happy, what communicates love to them, and making sure that you're expressing that in multiple ways. So, you know, little things that we've decided right from the beginning in our marriage was, you know, Joylyn is really, you know, big on physical touch and really big on, so when I leave, I don't leave without saying goodbye and a hug and a kiss. When I come home, I go to her and it's a hug and a kiss right away. And it's the communication that way is just saying, no, hey, you're the most important. I'm going to you. You get kids jumping on you, but you go right to her.
Because you never know, too, you know, that maybe that might be the last hug and kiss you'll ever receive from your spouse.
Yeah.
Something could happen, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I should have hugged and kissed my spouse.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it communicates priorities, right? So I'm excited to see you when I get home.
Yeah.
When I'm, you know, I miss you when I go. It's little things like that. It just keeps things. And then you know, text throughout the day or little sweet nothings here and there or whatever it might be is, just romance.
We still flirt with each other.
Yeah, we still flirt with one another. Yeah, we like that.
I've talked to other couples as well that say another thing you could do with your love language is maybe do the dishes. Or maybe the hubby can make dinner, you know, maybe once a week or twice a week. In the summertime, a lot more.
Yeah.
And we've got the barbecue going, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
if we want to keep the family alive, we do that as little as possible.
That's right. Well, but I mean, those are simple things you can do as well as a husband, right? Or
Yeah,
as a wife.
exactly.
Just little things like that.
Yeah, and things, they don't have to be big romantic gestures and going away for the weekend or whatever. And those are fun. Like you said, the date nights are fun, but no, it's all the little things along the way that show that you care and show that you're priority to each other.
How important is it to have something in common? A lot of people say opposites attract, it's better, you know, the yin with the yang, there's proper balance that way. You know, she's an introvert, I'm an extrovert, but we make it work. But I don't know, the older I get, my wife and I have been married for 30 years, I'm thinking having more things in common, similarities, works better, more effectively for a successful marriage. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the longer you are married, the longer, or the more things you do get in common, I think. The more things like we, my husband loves football, and he likes to say that I'm a huge fan of football, but I am a huge fan of him, and so I enjoy sitting down and watching it every once in a while with him.
And his reactions?
Yeah, well.
And the tears that flow?
I like when we're winning. But no, I think it's, you kind of love your person, and so you love what they love. And then there are some times when, like, we've always been in ministry, as he said, and so that's a huge passion beyond a job for both of us. And so that's our life, right? Like our ministry and our family. And so those things are huge commonalities that we share. But as far as hobbies and such like that, we
love the motorcycle. Yeah.
We love the motorcycle, and we enjoy doing things that the other likes to do as well.
Now you support him in football. What do you support Joylyn with? Maybe some of her passions.
Yeah, well.
Go to the opera, the ballet.
We watch some movies once in a while.
Chick flicks.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yes, he does.
He doesn't fall asleep though, does he?
No.
Okay.
No, he's very.
And I try hard not to mock any of them. It's good.
If he's quiet, then it's good.
How about when it comes to kids, making time for yourselves and say, kids, we love you guys, we'll die for you guys, but right now this is mom and dad time.
Yeah, hugely important. And my kids, because we homeschool them, they're home with me all the time. And Dad's home quite a bit too, just the way he is. He tries to be home as much as he can throughout between the meetings and stuff, and we'll pop into his office and all that. So they get to see him. It's not like they're desperate for both of us by the end of the day because they've seen us throughout the day. So yeah, we don't feel bad about saying, okay, you can go. Even screens are great babysitters every once in a while, where you say, go on your screens and we're going to just sit and talk, and it works sometimes.
Yeah, we try to do a holiday at least once
Yeah.
a year where it's just the two of us.
Yes.
And we do holidays with the family, but we have at least a week where the two of us just go away, and that's important.
Mm-hmm.
How important is respect when it comes to a relationship?
Oh man, it's utmost.
Yeah, it's vital.
I think even respecting who these people are, who your spouse is, and like you had talked about the love languages, and understanding that, okay, my love language is physical touch, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how he's going to feel love, but he knows that that's how I naturally show love. So just kind of respecting who each other is, and understanding that and going with that.
Yeah, I think love is talked about often, but I think respect is not talked about enough. I think it's a vital part of people will focus on love and the feeling of love, but I think respect is the showing of value at another level for each one. And it's always focused on just the men need it, men and women need respect too.
Yeah.
What about forgiveness?
Yes,
Like
huge.
some couples go through an affair, other couples go through whatever else, some traumatic experience in their relationship, and the person says, I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm. And I think forgiveness needs to be separated from trust too. Like that's a whole other issue for sure. But yeah, forgiveness is for yourself. And I think if you're waiting for the other person to need that forgiveness or to ask for that or to reciprocate it, then you're gonna be waiting for a while probably. So I think forgiveness is for your own health.
Yeah, it definitely it's about self, but forgiveness is like Joylyn said is different than trust, and we mix those things up, and I think the idea that we forgive and forget, I think that's a misnomer as well. I don't think there's certain things that you can't forget, but the ability to forgive is a choice to not hold against the other anymore, and that's freeing for yourself when you forgive your spouse. But that's also freeing for the relationship. So it's vital. We're all human beings. We're all fallible. We're all going to hurt one another. We're all going to make mistakes. So forgiveness is invaluable to a relationship.
When Julie and I first got married in 1990, I was working in radio, and a lot of broadcast journalists, you pay your dues all over Canada. You travel, you go from station to station. But one good thing that we really realized in the early years was that we had to rely on each other and God. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any outside interference from other family members. As much as we love our moms and our dads, but sometimes, they can interfere, especially when you first get married. Yep. So would you give that kind of advice to other couples as well, to maybe kind of distance yourself, maybe create a little separation with maybe some moms and dads?
Yes, I do a lot of premarital counseling, and I advise, especially for newlyweds, when they first get married, is keep a healthy a separation between, parents, and because if we run to our parents with everything that she did wrong, then mom and dad are going to take that resentment, and it's going to create tension in the family. And but we dump on mom and dad what she did wrong, but then we don't say, well, we made up and she apologized and all of that. Mom and dad are still walking around with this resentment, and it creates tension. And so be careful whose shoulder you cry on, but also the Bible does say leave and cleave, right? So it does say leave the parents. And so there has to be this healthy separation saying, hey, I don't need mom and dad like I did before. I'm leaving that necessity in order to focus on our marriage. And she's the most important thing now to me.
And I guess at the same time, if you ever want marital advice from your parents, let's say they're married 30, 40, 50 years, it's kind of cool that you can go talk to them as well, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because chances are they've been down the same road that you guys are going down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But make sure that your spouse is aware that when you're talking to mom and dad that we're having this conversation. This is what we talked about, and so that there's no expectation of tension as well, feeling like, okay, you're dumping on them about me. That makes it awkward as well. So just be honest with one another what the conversation is.
That brings me to secrets.
Yeah.
How dangerous are secrets between couples? Outside of the fact that you don't know what I got you for Father's Day or for your birthday, right?
There are no secrets. She always knows what I'm getting for
presents.
For
like,
presents.
oh,
I'm like, I can never. She's like, you got me this. Oh.
It's all right. He gets me what I want then.
Yeah.
How dangerous, Joylyn? What do you think? Secrets?
Yeah, I think they're hugely dangerous. And I think the fact that you, in the first place, feel like you need to keep a secret is the root of it rather than the secret itself, right? And so if you don't have that trust relationship with your spouse, that you feel like there's a secret that needs to be had, or you feel like that you can't trust them with something, or you're doing something that you shouldn't be and need to keep that secret, then it's hugely damaging.
It is,
Yeah.
It's the separation, I think, between intimacy. Like, intimacy is into me, you, see, and if there's a secret in there that I'm holding, then there's going to be a separation of that intimacy, and there's going to be something that's going to be a space between that's going to, and you might never, share it or not share it, or you may never know, but there's something that just created a space between that intimacy, and two becoming one, you can't afford that space.
How important is it having Jesus Christ as the foundation to a healthy marriage?
Vital. Yeah, absolutely vital. And I don't know, like, there's times when in our life we're like, we don't understand how people can go through things in life, in family, in marriage without having Jesus. And like Kelly said, we've always had that, and so we're able to, like, we've had that in our families, right?
Yes.
And so, we just feel like everybody needs that.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I totally agree. I think the best analogy that I saw was the picture of a triangle, and the further, the base of the triangle is the furthest separation between there. If God was at the point of the triangle, the closer that we get to God as it goes up the triangle, the closer we get to one another. Mm-hmm. And if one goes up and one doesn't, gets closer to God and one doesn't, there's still a separation in space. But the closer we get to God, the closer we get to one another. So I think He's the center, and it's vital for a healthy marriage.
That's a pyramid scheme I can get behind.
Yeah, there we go.
Absolutely.
Joylyn Stickle, Kelly Stickle with My Victory Church, thanks again for joining us here in studio.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.